Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Forum Daily West. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The federal government's GST tax break ends Saturday with data showing disappointing results for Canadian businesses. Plus, Lethbridge police search for the driver of a car who hit a youth, then drove away. And Eagles fans take to the streets in Philadelphia to see their Super Bowl champs. Thanks so much for joining us. A court case on the legality of the prorogation of Parliament is underway this week, with a judge expediting the case to be heard February 13th and 14th in Ottawa. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is arguing that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's prorogation of Parliament was unconstitutional. Here to update us on how the case is proceeding is attorney John Carpay, president of the Justice Centre, who joins me from Ottawa. John, welcome. What is the latest on this case?
The Justice Centre's lawyers were putting forward our case on Thursday, February 13th, to argue that government needs to be accountable to Parliament under our Constitution. So Parliament is the boss, and prorogation is a valid tool for shutting down Parliament after a session has been concluded, but it should not be used as a political tool by the Prime Minister to serve the interests of his political party. And so we're saying prorogation's fine, of course, but it shouldn't be abused in this fashion. I think the judge is very keen on releasing a decision early. He ordered an expedited hearing, and I would not be surprised if we had a ruling by February 21st. Would not surprise me.
February 21st, so that's only a week away, and it's, 4 weeks before Parliament's scheduled to return. So what makes you feel that way, John? How can you be so sure?
The judge was not at all sympathetic to the federal government's arguments that this should be like a normal court case and it should go on for months and years. The judge said, no, if we don't release a decision soon, then the decision would be irrelevant. If we come up with a court ruling in May, June, July, August, then it doesn't serve much of a point. But because we might get a ruling as early as Friday, February 21st, that's going to have a real impact, because the court ruling will mean that prorogation never really happened. And so Parliament will be back in session.
Yes, possibly a month early. So once a decision is made, then, John, could the feds appeal it or anything?
Well, the federal government could appeal, and but typically the rule is that the judgment stands unless and until it's overturned. Even if we lose, it's going to provide some clarity on what the Prime Minister's powers are. Currently, there's no Canadian case law that specifically outlines what the Prime Minister can and cannot do in regard to proroguing Parliament. So it'll be worthwhile from that sense. We'll get some clarification in place, because this is the first court action of its kind in Canada.
Wow, so this could be setting a precedent. We'll be watching for that ruling next week. John, thanks so much for your time today. That was attorney John Carpay, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedom, joining us from Ottawa. Conservatives are focused on the man they think will be that they'll be running against, which is Mark Carney. MPs headed into the Conservative caucus meeting and stayed on message about the man they've branded as, quote, carbon tax Carney. Carney is the apparent front runner in the Liberal leadership race and has pledged to end the consumer carbon price. Conservative MPs brushed off concerns today about their party's recent slump in the polls since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his plan to resign. Meantime, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he expects a snap election call if Carney wins the Liberal leadership next month. Singh says the New Democrats will be ready to fight an election campaign when it begins. Part of that fight includes the NDP's pledge to remove the GST from essentials like home heating, cell phone services, grab-and-go grocery items, diapers, and children's clothes. And speaking of GST, the federal government's goods and services tax break on a slew of items ends tomorrow. Shoppers have been getting some relief on restaurant meals, children's clothing and toys, some alcohol, and more for the past 2 months now. Canadian business owners say the GST holiday was a gift, but not one that inspired the flurry of sales that some anticipated. Data from payments processor Moneris shows the number of transactions across all stores during the tax relief period fell 4% compared with a year ago. And one local business in Lethbridge says the GST tax break didn't affect his sales in the way it was meant to. The owner of King of Trade Pawn Shop also mentioned it was confusing to staff and customers on what items were meant to be taxed.
You know, we really didn't see an increase in sales. It happened before Christmas is when that got put in. And we did have people asking about it. And, you know, we reduced our video games in accordance with those that new tax. But really the sales were the same. It didn't really increase sales for us. The hardest thing about it was that it took a lot of time in our computer system to make adjustments. And there was a lot of questions by customers as to what was taxable and not taxable, and I think there wasn't a very good job done on an explanation for it from the government. I think the government was trying to do a good thing. It just, in my opinion, didn't really work out for the retailers or the customers, and so maybe next time they could think it through a little better.
And in other news, the Canadian Union of Public Employees says more than 400 school support workers with the Parkland School Division were served a 72-hour strike notice today. Local President Wendy Harmon says the union expects to begin work to rule actions on a Tuesday, meaning they'll be asked not to work beyond the hours they're paid for and not to do any volunteering at their jobs. Some 4,000 other educational workers are on strike in Edmonton, nearby Sturgeon County, and Fort McMurray. Another 2,000 with school divisions in Calgary and elsewhere in Alberta have taken strike votes. A Red Deer police officer, RCMP officer rather, who was investigated in a shooting death during the attempted apprehension of a suspect, has been found not guilty of breaking the criminal code, according to an investigation that was concluded February 13th. BCN's Naveen Day is here to explain this investigation in more detail. Naveen?
Well, Jeanette, according to this recent decision, on April the 13th of last year, the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ASIRT, was ordered to investigate whether the force used by the officer during this incident was reasonable. The case involved a man calling 911 to report his son had a knife and had threatened to slit the father's throat, and that earlier the same day, the man had obtained a court order to have his son apprehended under the Mental Health Act. When officers arrived, the suspect still had the knife and then was tased because he would not let it go. According to the report, the taser seemed to have no effect, so a second officer tased the suspect as well. The tased individual then dropped to his knees, but according to other witness officers, the suspect lunged at one of the officers, who then shot him 4 or 5 times, resulting in his death. The father of the suspect says the gunshots were unnecessary since his son was already on his knees and tased. However, ASIRT has concluded that under Section 25 of the Criminal Code, a police officer is justified in using as much force as is reasonably necessary, and that force intended to cause death or bodily harm is justified if the officer believes it was necessary to prevent the death or bodily harm of the officer or any other person. ASIRT says while the death of this individual is unfortunate, the force used by the officer was proportionate, necessary, and reasonable in the circumstances. Jeanette?
Okay, thanks so much, Naveen. In other news, Lethbridge police are asking for public assistance in the investigation of a hit-and-run pedestrian collision. On February 10th at about 5:04 p.m., a male youth was crossing Jerry Potts Boulevard West around Mike Mountain Horse School when he was struck by a vehicle. The vehicle made no attempt to stop, and the youth sustained minor injuries. CCTV images reveal the car was a silver sedan, but are not clear enough to identify the vehicle or driver. Lethbridge police are asking anyone who may have been in the area on Monday, February 10th between 4:55 and 5:15 p.m. And may have witnessed the incident or has home security video or dash cam footage to call 403-328-4444 and reference that number on your screen. WestJet says new multi-billion-dollar long-term commercial agreement is in the works with German aircraft services firm Lufthansa Technik. The deal would see Lufthansa Technik build a new aircraft engine maintenance facility in Calgary to service WestJet's approximately 50 Boeing 737 MAX airplanes. The facility is slated to be built by the Calgary Airport Authority and is expected to cost about $120 million. WestJet says the 15-year contract is the largest in the carrier's existence. We'll be right back with more news from Forum Daily West. When comparing recent crime trends in Canada and the U.S., Lethbridge has the highest rate of property crime nationwide. That is according to a report released Thursday by the Fraser Institute, which found that Lethbridge's rate was more than twice the national average. The same day, Lethbridge Police Chief Shaheen Medizadeh told reporters the Fraser report is flawed because it draws from out-of-date information from 2019 to 2022.
In 2023, Lethbridge ranked 6th in CSI for violent crime, and we expect a 10% decrease for 2024 from those numbers. And in 2023, Lethbridge ranked 2nd for non-violent crime, which would include property crimes, but we expect a 20% decrease for 2024. So the trending over the since the year 2020 has been on a downward trend, which is what we are dealing with currently, and the report talks about 2019 to 2022.
Chief Medizadeh adds that nationwide crime statistics are available from Stats Canada and are updated annually in the summer. Well, we've got a big weekend ahead of us. It's Valentine's Day and also the Family Day long weekend, at least here in Alberta. And with that, folks could be hitting the road to do some traveling this long weekend. Troy Hicks, Chief Fire Marshal with the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services, offers some tips for keeping your home safe while you're away and also when hitting the highway on a winter road trip.
I always have my winter jacket with me. I always have a couple sets of toques and gloves. Winter boots, anything like that, heaven forbid something happens. So just make sure you do have a warm kit like that, blankets for you and your family. Another thing too, always make sure your vehicle's full. Cell phones, make sure you have one and make sure it's charged and ready to go. If you're unlucky enough that maybe you do go off the road and you can't get out, call AMA, you call anyone you can to get some help and get some service. Get out of your vehicle and have a look. Don't just stay in your vehicle with the engine running, trying to stay warm. If you're now in a snowbank, your exhaust and your muffler could be covered in snow. Now you don't have ventilation, now your vehicle is filling up with that exhaust. If you're leaving your home for any time, I know most insurance companies want to know that you have someone checking on your home. I always turn my heat down a little bit. Unplug anything you don't need.
Hicks also recommends unplugging televisions, coffee pots, toasters, and other appliances that you're not going to be using. It's Valentine's Day and love is in the air, but so are romance scams. Wes LaFortune, Media Relations with the Better Business Bureau, explains how to avoid these pretend Romeo and Juliets who aren't exactly looking for romantic relationships, but are instead after your money with fake profiles on different social networks.
Too good looking, the hot factor, too hot, too much money, too successful. It's like, wow, this is the man or woman of my dream right away. Probably not. So that's a big one. Biggest red flag is the money, asking for money, no matter what the circumstances. Hard luck story or an investment scheme, or the romance cryptocurrency scam, or they call that catfishing, somebody that creates a false profile. The whole intention of that person is to build a trusting relationship with you and then gain your trust. In Alberta, cryptocurrency investments in 2023 officially cost Albertans more than $300 million. But we know that is much higher because only about 5% of people actually report.
LaFortune encourages anyone who has been a victim of this type of crime to report it to local police or the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Well, it may be the coldest month of the year right now, but that doesn't mean people aren't already planning for the warmer months ahead. The City of Lethbridge is posting full-time seasonal job positions to work through the spring and summer months. Approximately 50 to 60 positions will open in departments including parks and cemeteries, transportation, waste, and recycling.
So some of the qualifications that are standard across our job postings are we want to ensure that our employees have a GED or high school education. We're also looking for employees that have, or candidates that have a driver's license, but we want to be clear and ensure that they're not GDL licenses. So we will be hosting a job fair on March 11th in person at the Cavendish Centre on the west side. We'll also be doing a virtual job fair on the 12th for all of those students who may be working out or going to school outside of the community and still wanting to come back to Lethbridge for the summer. We don't want to prevent them from having that opportunity as well to participate in working for the city for the summer.
That is your Forum Daily West report. I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for watching.